Thanks also for the opportunity to speak to the meeting today. In auspicious company I am. As Paul has said, my name is Angie Wright. I'm Chief Officer of an organisation called Be Inspired, which is in Braunston in Leicester. And Leicester's been in the press for a long time now, especially through the pandemic, as we've been the longest under any restrictions. So we're famous for many things, and that's the latest thing. Just a couple of comments before I start a presentation. It's really, really good to be hearing the term regeneration being used so widely again, and in a really positive way. Regeneration is something that we believe we've been in for a very long time in the work that we do, and it's really good to be hearing that term again in this sort of conversation. But I'll kick off with the presentation just to tell you about who we are and what we do, just to try and contextualise it a bit at the coalface, really. Next slide, please, Rob. So a bit about Braunston. As I say, we're in Leicester. We're what's called a garden estate, built in the 1930s to clear the inner city slums of Leicester, and that brought with it lots of inherent problems. Actually, when people moved into the area, we've got big houses, we've got big gardens, we've got lots of really green space, second largest park in the city, but we've got no high street. There was very little public realm built into the estate. 16,500 residents, so it's quite a big estate. 5,000 households, lots of bungalows. We've got lots of older people living on their own. Again, brings its own problems. We do have a really strong legacy of regeneration as a former New Deal for Communities area, which I'll mention a little bit later. And we do actually have lots of great facilities, many of which came through the investment of the New Deal programme. And we are famous in the city for our community spirit. Next slide, please, Rob. But we do have inherent challenges. And in terms of league tables, certainly locally, we generally feature at the wrong end for most things related to deprivation, with the majority of people living in the bottom decile of the multiple deprivation scores, and around 20% of adults out of work or on benefits. Health inequalities are really entrenched in the area, and particularly in women, and you can see there 27 years in poor health for women living in parts of our neighbourhood. So it's a very stark contrast to bordering neighbourhoods. And we've got the highest number of so-called trouble families in the city, with antisocial behaviour, children truanting and parents out of work. Next, please, Rob. So who are we and what do we do in Braunston? Well, first and foremost, we are a charity. Our official name is the Braunston Foundation, but we trade as Be Inspired. We were founded 20 years ago by local residents. We operate as a community anchor, and that's a term that's been used in different contexts these days, really, but truly in the sense of community anchor as a local community organisation that people look to. We do operate as a community business, as Paul mentioned at the beginning, so we do make profit but for purpose. And we do have a wholly owned trading company to that end. We have a big range of services and projects, the sorts of things you might expect, particularly supporting people into employment, training, volunteering, befriending for older people with high levels of isolation and loneliness. We have an ever-increasing food bank demand. We do welfare and debt advice. We also own community facilities and sports facilities. And very importantly, we operate something called neighbourhood management locally. Next slide, please, Rob. So our regeneration legacy, and I mentioned that we were one of the original, we were a pathfinder in actual fact for the New Deal for Communities programme, often lamented when people look back now, but in actual fact, our experience has been very positive. So we had a 10 years investment of £50 million by the then Labour government. And the really important thing to say is that local residents did not want the local authority to lead or be the accountable body on that scheme, or any public body for that matter. And they sort of fought the cause right at the beginning and set up their own task force and became an independent resident-led programme. And I am wholly convinced that that is the reason why we're still here now as a legacy. It did create difficult times, particularly at the beginning. There were fractious times and often divisive, approaches. How often do people get offered £50 million to make decisions around? So that was bound to create that storming at the beginning. But as time went on, we were an incredibly successful regeneration programme, and there was transformational change, certainly in the fabric of the area and in the people projects, what actually was invested in people in terms of improving skills, improving that connectedness. Lots of community development work went in, and some measures of success, plausible measures of success, I think were sometimes difficult, but there was a 10-year Mori poll of the same 500 residents throughout the programme. And what we did find by the end that the combined income of most families had increased by £100 a month by the end of the programme, and that car ownership had increased. So some measures of sort of economic outcome really. However, although there was transformational change, it couldn't really remedy the 30 years plus of decline that the area had suffered. But the important things to learn from the legacy of the New Deal programme for us was that there was an increased confidence in the community and increased expectation, which I think is very important. There was increased capacity through the experience that they'd had and the learning that they'd acquired through the process and their involvement. And certainly there was increased capacity and resilience through community-owned assets, and the social capital increased. So when you talk about that sort of connectiveness and the cultural resources and so on that Danny just mentioned, the glue that binds people together, that social capital, we really felt and measured the increases in that. Next one, please, Rob. So we trade for success now. That's the term that we like to use. So left with this legacy that we have, how do we continue the regeneration, and how do we continue with the main involvement of local people? So we are a major legacy of succession of that programme, and we've been 10 years independent now as a charity, and we now have an asset base of 8.2 million with a turnover around 1.7 million. And as at this year, only around 28% of that actually comes from public funding grants. The vast majority is earned income, income from rents. We have quite a diverse portfolio of property, including social housing and managed workspace and offices and community facilities. And very importantly, we own our local health centre. So this was a major project during the New Deal programme, a £5 million project, and we actually now own that building and manage it, and our tenants are social services and the NHS, which is a very interesting model, and they get a much better deal and a much better service than many of the PFI funding programmes and buildings. And we trade locally, and we try and spend as much money as we can locally. We are real living wage employers. We have 42 staff, 7 trustees, 70% are local people, 90% of our volunteers live in Braunston, and we really are very much committed to procuring local goods and services to strengthen our own local economies. Next one, please, Rob. I mentioned earlier that we also operate with a neighbourhood management approach. This was something that we transitioned to 10 years ago. When we got to the end of the regeneration programme, we were concerned that many of the service providers, particularly the public service providers, would walk away when the big money stopped. So we transitioned into a neighbourhood management board, which has around 20 members, and they're both service providers and residents, and we still meet 6 weekly to share information, discuss issues. We collaborate a lot. We have joint projects and responses to local issues. We also support, we set up and supported a residents network, which has over 400 members, and we very actively consult with them, and we involve them in social action locally. We produce a biannual neighbourhood action plan for our area. This isn't by way of being asked to do it by anybody or funded to do it or required to do it by a funding programme or anything like that. We do it so that we understand the state of our area, what's the state of the nation for us locally, and how things are changing, improving or not. And and what that means for local people. So we combine evidence from service providers about their strategies and their objectives and their targets and their funding priorities. We put that with administration data around health and education and crime, etc. And then as a result of that, we could then go to local people and we consult with them, we take focus groups, and we try and create a picture about what things are really important to local people, set in the context of what the sort of the macro information is. So this is an important process to us. And so the Neighbourhood Management Board, along with the Neighbourhood Action Plan, provides us with a very rich and important source of knowledge for us as an organisation. So we plan and deliver what we provide for local people, but also for service providers as well, and for politicians and policymakers, commissioners, funders. Everybody can look to that document, to the work that we do, to the neighbourhood management, to understand if they want to have an impact in Braunston, that's the place to start. Next slide, please, Rob. We're also looking to grow our economy very much with a community business approach. We're currently being invested in by Power to Change, and Bonnie Houston, I know, is on the call. We work with very closely on the Empowering Places programme, one of their major programmes, investing directly into places. And we're a catalyst for residents who want to explore community business ideas, to nurture them, to invest in capacity, support in training and learning and resources to help get community businesses launched locally. We aim to have 5 new community businesses by the end of this programme. This will help to strengthen local economies, attracting volunteers, providing learning, experience, local employment, and spending more money locally and the value that that adds. And we know from recent research that actually community businesses have survived, more than survived, they've been significantly more resilient during the pandemic. And this is borne out through community pubs and shops thriving and surviving actually. Next one, please, Rob. So confidence, capacity and cash is sort of the subtitle for this session today. I'm just trying to sort of think about that and put that into context here. I think what we've seen over 20 years is agencies come and go, initiatives come and go, projects come and go, but we remain and we thrive. Our confidence comes from our long-term approach and investment. We're forged from the community, we're trusted by the community, we're relied upon by the community. Our mission is very clear, it is about Braunston and it remains relevant. The knowledge and skills that we've acquired continue to improve our own capacity and then that of our community. And our aim of self-reliance through our own asset ownership and our own trading means that we can respond and invest in what we know is needed locally and not through what we're directed. Last one, I think, Rob, now. Thank you. So community control and power, obviously a great theme going through the work of this group and this session. I totally understand that many have long-term aspiration to unlock community power. And I think it's got to be the opposite to the council meetings that I often attend, where local politicians and officers are wheeled out to respond to issues. And it's got to be well beyond the consultation and planning events that we certainly experience. And of course, the COVID pandemic has demonstrated that communities can spring into action and generally far quicker than public services. But to achieve, effective local partnerships, working together across professions and sectors, there's got to be long-term hyper-local investment in local action and the infrastructure to help that to breed and survive. And there's got to be in community development investment for skills for staff, particularly I think in local authorities and health authorities, so that they are better able to work alongside communities in this way. And there's got to be flexible funds, again, hyperlocal, that can accelerate social action. And I think that will breed the mutual benefit that we're all desiring. And that's me, thank you.